Gary Quinn, thank you so very much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate you being here. Thank you. You are so, I have to say this, you're so awesome. I think everything you've done, you are a global, well, international motivational speaker, life coach, author. You have 8 books, I believe, out, from the Yes Frequency to your most recent one. Oh my gosh, you
Become
are
your own business guru. This one.
Yes. I have the hardest time saying guru. Is
Right.
anyway, I feel like guru.
Right. It's a play on words. It wasn't actually, when the word guru has some negative connotation, but it's more that you are the guru of your life. So you choose what works for you or what seems to translate into your authentic self.
And I love that about you. You're all about being real and authentic, and people turn to you for help. How was it that you found yourself in this position of doing that for people?
I was always in that mindset of helping people. And I think when I became a personal manager and producer, I started helping clients to achieve their goals, whether it was directors or actors that we had. So I was kind of doing it already. It was just in a different name, even though it was the same work. I would attract lots of people, actors and directors, just by me going to events or people referring people to. So, one of my clients who was on a TV show, Janelle Allen on Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, she'd been on Broadway, she'd been nominated for a Tony. I started this work really deep with her intuitively, and she would say, "Why don't you do something with this?" And I said, "Well, I really don't know what to do with it." And I would go to the Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman set on location twice a week. So everybody knew me as this, not just a manager, but an intuitive manager. So if I needed the script for the following week, all the girls knew me in the office. And if Jane was having a bad day, they would have me go into her trailer. So it was really, that's where it was sort of activated. I started to really do my own journey of work. And then I wrote my first book, which was about my experience in France with Archangel Michael many years ago. And that was the catalyst to start this, let's say, worldwide exposition. My first country was England. It was America, then England, and then it became Australia. Then I started going to England a lot. I went to Ireland, Isle of Man. And then that translated into other countries in Europe, which, was just like the feed just kept going from England to Germany to Switzerland to Italy to Amsterdam to Romania. So I've been a lot of places with this work. And what I found is that people generally all want the same things. They want to be happy, they want to feel emotionally nourished. They want to have love, they want to have financial freedom, but it's a cause and effect until they really start to work on themselves internally. They don't really see a big shift. And because I also have a big following of I do personal sessions, which are one-to-one coaching, and that seems to be the bulk of my work for all these years. And I have everybody from celebrities over the years that they used to find me, then CEOs and business people. And I worked with the Academy of Business Leadership with young kids. It's for everybody. It's not just for the elite or I've worked with kids who have been having problems as teenagers that their parents coached with me, and I've helped the kids get through many issues. So it's just a matter of really being of service to people and really making yourself available.
Now, going back to when you met Archangel Michael, which I would imagine would be a life-altering experience, What exactly happened, and would you be willing to share any of that?
Sure. I mean, I had always worked in entertainment business of everything from a writer to an actor to I was a personal PA to probably 15 top stars on television series and film. And I was just able to do a lot of different things. And I really didn't know about Archangel Michael. I wasn't super religious.
Mhm.
And I found an opportunity that took me to Paris, France,
Mhm.
not for spiritual awakening, but for an entertainment opportunity,
Mhm.
giving me a record contract because I also was singing the touring company of a play called Grease. It got me there, and I think everything, one door open, six doors open. And I
Mhm.
wasn't planning on moving to France until I got the contract just by standing up and singing in a club, the American Center there.
Mhm.
And I then moved back there 6 months later, sold everything in LA, and then realizing when I arrived there that there was no contract because the company had closed that division, even though I had signed a contract. They weren't holding me to it because the person had left, the producer, to go work with Stephanie DeMonico had a hit record there. So he went to Monaco instead. So I found myself in Paris going, why am I here? I know probably two people, and the rest was all based on me building trust with the spirituality. And
Mhm.
something internally said, you need to go to get your answer at Notre Dame. So I went to Notre Dame daily, probably 4 to 6 hours a day for probably 3 weeks. And I would just go there to sit and wait for an answer. I had no idea where it was coming from. I would go sit in the pews, and I think it was a way for me to silence Hollywood, the spinning, because I really wasn't doing meditation at all. But I found myself doing it there and having the opportunity to start looking at myself and realizing, okay, this is what life is about. You sink or swim, but I think what I learned was trust and the awareness of tuning into my gift full speed. And it was a Thursday afternoon around 3 o'clock. And I would go there regularly and I would see some of the same people that would go into that church. And I always went to the corner, the pew. There was a section where there were some saints, and there was a pew to the right of the church. And I would sit there for hours. And one afternoon, I sat there. All of a sudden, this energy started spinning on top of me, almost like hovering over me. This light went on. It was almost like I was in a vacuum tube, and I couldn't move. I couldn't really. I just kind of froze, and all I remember is time stood still,
Mhm.
and this energy started talking to me telepathically. And I never thought I was dreaming or anything. I was in this altered state of consciousness. And the voice said, "You're not here to work in the entertainment business." And I go, okay, what is this? Telepathically.
Mhm.
And the voice said, I'm Archangel Michael, and you're here to learn about us and your gift. And I said, okay. I was so desperate. Okay. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And at that moment, there was this wave of energy that just covered me, almost like a rain of love, shower of love went over me. And all of a sudden, I felt like I could breathe. I was like safe, and then I started to cry because it just really, I think when you're working in that energy,
Mhm.
that's when it happens emotionally. You just download. And I remember then all of a sudden this energy left, and I started seeing people back in the church, and I walked outside and I thought, was that a dream? What was that?
Mhm.
And 2 minutes into my apartment, I lived in a 200-year-old apartment,
Wow.
14 stories high, no elevator. You'd
Oh.
have to walk up, and the apartment had entities in it. It was, I'm sure.
Mhm.
At night, I used to hear rattling like music with chains, and there was no neighbors. Anyway, long story short, I went back to the apartment and I was only there. It was going to be my friend had sublet it, so I had to leave like in 4 days. And the phone rang, and the only person that I knew, Xavier, who I met here in LA because he was dating an actress that I used to work with, Deborah Lee Scott.
Mhm.
And he said, "Do you need a free place to live?" And he said, "For a year." And I said, "What?" "Absolutely. What do I have to do?" He said, "Well, he worked for a producer named Robert Altman who had a company there called Sand Dollar." And he said, we rented this apartment in Montmartre, and the people who wrote Nashville, we want them to write Nashville too, but they want to write it in LA. They don't want to come to Paris. So we have this apartment that's vacant for a year, and there's a cat there. Is that okay? I said, absolutely. So he said, have your bags ready, and I'll pick you up tomorrow at 4. And that was sort of the start of a miracle that happened from one door opening, three other doors opening. So that was kind of my introduction to the angel world and what I experienced. And I was there for a year, and I met so many people. By the time I moved back to America, I must have known at least 60 people that I had met that had become connected to me. And that was the start of this work. But I came back to Los Angeles and I went right back into the entertainment world. I forgot about that whole experience.
Mhm.
And I started opening a company with a business partner from England. And we did a management, production, and producing company, and just forgot about this other thing that ever happened. And then it started up again when my client Janelle, I told her that story. And then I think I had also done more meditation. I started to do more things in the spiritual realm. I also had a few um, let's say, mentors of people that I met. One of them was Terry Cole Whitaker, who is a well-known teacher, healer, spiritual reverend. She had a church in San Diego that was huge. She had a lot of people. Anthony Robbins studied with her. And I used to go to her house in Malibu, and I wasn't doing this at all. I was still doing my entertainment work. But I started to open up to this information, and then after 10 years of working in entertainment, I sort of became burnt out. My business partner wanted to move back to England, and so I basically closed the company with him and kept 5 clients that were on TV shows, and then started doing this work sort of silently while I was writing my book. And then I told my clients, when I sell my book, I'm going to have to let you go. And I've been with some of them for 9 years, 10 years. So it happened. And is how I started this work, traveling to whatever country the books were published, I would go.
Well, one of your best-selling books is about angels, how to connect.
Yes. May
So,
the Angels Be With You was the very first book, Random House, and it became a bestseller, selling over 100,000 copies. And that was sort of the catalyst that kicked the ball, off to doing this.
so when you were writing that book, were you actually connected with your angels to write that, or
Oh,
what was?
sure. The whole book and the journey of how I met um, an agent on a friend of an agent on an airplane, and how I got to New York to meet all these publishers was the work of, the trust of working with the angelic forces. It was just kind of tuning in to what I needed to do and how I needed to go about it.
But that seems like that's what you do though. You tune in. And like when you
Correct.
tune in, that's what you help your clients do.
Correct.
Why is it people are always so turned off to that? Why is it people don't want to pay attention or are
Well, I think tuning in has different connotations. I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not this. It's more about everybody is intuitive. Everybody has thought of someone and they've called them or they've run into them the next day or in a week. Um, it's really a term of just using your inner senses. It's like a good actor is intuitive, almost like an empath. Same with a script writer. Anything in the creative world is downloaded. An
Mhm.
artist, same thing. So it's not like they're not doing it already. They just don't know what it's called. And it's the same technique of really going within and silencing the noise
Mhm.
and really trusting what's coming up.
It seems like trust is a big issue for people, period.
Totally. People don't trust themselves, they don't trust the process, or they doubt themselves and then they stop the flow.
Why do you think that is?
The fear, the unknown, that might be scary if it happens, self-sabotage. There's many reasons why the trust maybe doesn't kick in, because it is a hard one to not only trust yourself, trust the world, the process of the universe, your faith, if you have one. So I believe that it's a combo. It's a combo.
So, what inspired you to get started with your program, Touchstone?
I was going to all these countries and people were saying, I do a session with them, and then they would say, well, how can I do more?
Mm.
Is there a program or a class you teach? I said, no, I don't have time. And I said that for many years until I wrote the second book, which was called Living in the Spiritual Zone.
Mm.
And I finally put a thing in the back page that they printed, that the publishers printed, and then people started calling me. And then the Touchstone for the program was born, and it was 8 sessions to activate the best energy or the authentic self, because there is a process to it. But most of the people that started the program with me 15 years ago are
Mm.
still with me, meaning it's become an ongoing, it's like, and I don't want to call it therapy, but it's to remind them I keep them on track. And I
Mm.
have heads of studios, I have doctors in Toronto, I have, entertainment lawyers here, I have people clients in Switzerland, clients in Italy that I coach every 3 weeks. I mean, the godsend is Zoom because that was able to spread because I could only do it by telephone or in person if I was in those countries. But now, because of Zoom, we have an instant connection to
Mm.
the other place or the other side where we are. So
I
that
think
that was so that's how it started, and then it just, continued to grow.
so. You teach people now how to be coaches themselves.
Exactly. In the program, you have two choices. I can give you the version where I teach you how to do what I do, if that's what you would like to do. And I have probably 3 successful clients that are doing it now.
Mm.
Dominique, I don't, oh, here's her flyer. This is a client of mine. 10 years ago, I was doing an event in Zurich, and it's called the Lebenskraft. And
Mm.
she stood up. I said, any questions? And she stood up and said, I want to do what you do. And I said, come on up.
Nice.
It took her 10 years to get this off the ground, but she has a program in Switzerland and she takes people to Bhutan. And I'm so proud of her. I still coach her, but
Wow.
she's living her dream. And I have another gentleman, Eric, in France, that's doing the same. So some people learn to take it to the next level. And I don't teach them to be mini me's. I give
Mm.
them the tools and then activate the best parts of them. And then they can add things to their repertoire or their teaching. So I think it's part of being individual. I don't
Mm.
want to create the same cookie cutter mold of people, but I give them the basics of how to grow your garden and how you can use all the tools to help people build their gardens.
Now, what if someone tells you, I don't know what my gifts are? I'm terrible at everything, but they feel blocked and they feel like they have to break free.
Well, first is to unblock them, which
Mm.
I do that through the forgiveness exercise work. And here's the thing, a lot of people may do what I do, copy, but there's something else that happens when I do a forgiveness session or I have sessions with people. I'm and there's a gentleman who I've coached he's the biggest guy in Switzerland, who's like the Anthony Robbins of Switzerland. And he said, "What is this Gary Quinn stuff?" He says, "I can't, my wife cannot duplicate it. And she studied everything that you taught me. It's the energy."
Mm-hmm.
So when I work with a person in the forgiveness exercise, there's another transformation of healing that I'm doing without me knowing how, that's
Mm.
actually downloading through them, but draining their swimming pool of the old emotional, let's say, not behavior, but emotional blocks that are blocking them.
Wow. And do they feel like, okay, now
Well,
what?
a lot of them are sort of paralyzed for a couple days. One of my clients in New York couldn't get out of bed for 2 days because you're dumping a lot of old stuff that you've been carrying around for 20 to 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And some people get very angry.
Mm.
It opens the door to the anger that's been repressed.
Mm.
Um, Usually, some people start crying in a session. It just depends. And I always tell people if they leave, even on it works on Zoom,
Mm.
and they become angry to go exercise, go take a hot shower with some kind of salt or herb bath or sauna, anything, or go swim in the ocean, it changes the frequency because you're detoxing. It's almost the same analogy if you quit coffee, you have a terrible headache for a couple days.
Right. So what usually happens after the detox?
Well, then we have to upload all the positive new intentions and let's say uh, affirmations that will help to create the mission statement of
Mm.
what we want to happen for them. And then they have to keep feeding that into their subconscious in order to activate it and get it started. And it usually takes 21 days, this process,
Mm.
to detox and activate. So I spread out the coaching because people have to assimilate it. So I
Mm.
spread it out for probably 3 months, 3 to 4 months. I've had some people who came to train with me for the week. It's not as powerful it's not like you're doing a class for 8 hours. So it really needs time to go, you need to go out into the real world and practice what you've learned.
So you really have to make a commitment to wanting to do something like that then.
Absolutely. But you also have to know if you're not growing, you're not flowing.
Right, exactly. Now, affirmations are something people hear about everywhere, and you'll see videos all over social media saying that if you just keep saying this, it will happen. But it seems like there has to be a certain amount of action to go
Well,
with.
the action with the emotional state of being, that's why I created this card deck that goes with the Business Guru. It's 44 cards that are related to affirmations, and there's a message about what you're to learn, which is persistence, integrity, joy, love, forgiveness, all of those come up. And usually when clients, my real estate people love these. And one of my clients bought 25 for her Christmas gifts for her company. But you shuffle them and you pick one card, and that's your message. And then on the back is an affirmation. And I was able to interview and meet Louise Hay many years ago before she passed, and she was the queen of affirmations. And it's an energy. And one of my affirmations was I wanted to interview her because I had a radio show that I was doing. It wasn't a radio show; it was a magazine or newspaper that I wrote for, and I had like a radio quality interview mic and the whole thing, and that's what I would take to a lot of the events that I would go to. And I interviewed Deepak. That's how I met him. I interviewed Louise Hay. But that was
Mm.
the universe telling me no at that time. But then I had gone to the hey, I gave a talk in the it was the BEA Book Fair in New York City, and one of my books was Living in the Spiritual Zone, and it was plastered all over these what do you call it? Neon lights. It was like a big book fair, well, like where all the booksellers would come and buy books. So everybody had a booth, giant booths, Hay House, Warner Brothers or Warner what do you call it? Edition, HarperCollins, Random House, but they were massive, like almost like you were going to the Cannes Film Festival, but
Mm.
and so my books were all lit up. I had four page blocks of it, which was living in the spiritual zone. And I thought, well, I'm here. I should go see if I can interview people. So
Mm.
I met Suzanne Summers there because she was with Random House. She was promoting her book. They would lock out sections where people would get to speak and sign books for everybody. So mine was not until a day later. So I had the whole day to kind of look and see what's out there, meet people, see my old editors. And basically, I went to the Hay House booth, and I started doing seminars with a company called, and I worked for them all over the country, the Learning Annex,
Mm.
which, you know, they have one in San Francisco, New York, Toronto, LA, San Diego. I did all of them. And I then go to the Hay House booth, and it's huge. I mean, they had like an arena area and like a kiosk at the airport, but giant. And I go to the booth and I see the owners or the people who own the Learning Annex, Toronto, San Diego, and San Francisco. And I had already gone to Louise Hayes's PR lady there, and I said, I'd like 5 minutes interview with Louise. Is that possible?" And she goes, "No, we don't do interviews." And I said, "Okay." So one of my intentions, though, I was going to meet her and interview her. And so I walked to the booth where all the new books are. So all of the people from the Learning Annex see me and they yell out loud, "Gary, Gary." And then they point to me, to Louise Hay, "You should sign this guy. He's amazing."
Mm.
And I shook their hands. I said bye. And then the PR lady came up to me and said, "Louise would like to do the interview. Can you still do it?" I said,
No.
"Absolutely." So I sat down with her in her area and I promised 5 minutes, so it was only 5 minutes, but she didn't want to stop. But I
Mm.
said, "Okay, we're done. 5 minutes." I said 5 minutes. So things like that always happen for me, but I think it's the intention. I went to New York saying I wanted to meet her and interview her. And then I got a photo with her.
Oh,
And then, that was kind of the energy that flows.
that's so wonderful. All right, so we have this energy flowing, which is amazing, and you're helping people find their authentic self. When you have something like what's happening now in, the war in Iran, all this political strife, and people feel so off kilter just by listening to the news. Now, there are other reasons I'm sure too, but they really get so angry or so wrapped up in it, they can't even think straight. How can they find their balance? How can they just come?
Well, this is why at this moment, I think people have to do the inner work and to stay on course of their own message of what they want, because it's so easy to be thrown into the stress and the anxiety and the drama and the fear. Um, so it's part of our, let's say, individual choice to try to find that source that makes you feel happy, and to not feel so anxiety stressed about the world that it stops you. I think now more than ever, it's really time to find your power and move towards it and not shut down. And I think during any kind of crisis, it will pass and
Mhm.
it will. I think the best thing is to continue to sending love, and people say, oh, but sending love, that's so airy fairy. It's like, no, there is power in prayer, and
Mhm.
I've tested it out with clients that did not get their commission check from their managers that was owed 50 grand. And I went to do a little talk at her house, and we all, 10 of us, held hands. And the man had already called her and he left her and said, I'm not paying you that commission. And it was a big TV show in the 90s or late 90s. And this was her livelihood. So we did this prayer and we were all holding hands. And I'd offered to give her a free little talk in her house for some of her friends. And what that was the intention, that he was going to pay the bill or send her the money.
Mhm.
And 3 days later, she called me and she said, you're not going to believe what happened. I said, oh, yeah, tell me. She said, I got a call from his lawyer and
Mhm.
said, we're going to pay you. Where do we send the check? And she got the check and the 50 grand that was owed, because it was like 8 episodes or 10 episodes. But I think that's the part of the
Mhm.
process of being able to shift.
Really just and I love that. So if there was a big enough group, you could shift things on a bigger scale too
You
then.
could shift the world, you could shift the planet. And if everybody took their power in that vessel to send out this peace and this love vibration, it
Mhm.
would transform the world immediately. So think of every city, every country that would just be, it would just flush out the fear and automatic. It would be like if Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama were walking down the street in a busy city. They probably, their frequency would blow out the windows because it would be so high of this vibration that they're putting out that it would stop people in their tracks. So there's different ways of looking at this. And I think if you get so wrapped up in, the drama of the greed and the fear, it is overwhelming. It's too much.
So what would be the first steps for someone to break away from that?
Well, I think to go into nature, hiking, being in nature, go hug a tree, go by the water, sit in the sand in the water, um, maybe go to something you enjoy doing. If it's baking, you should just bake some cookies and give them away. Cakes, I don't care. Anything that you can paint a picture, paint a portrait, write a poem. Uh, go read stories to kids at Children's Hospital that are dying of terminal cancer and see where they're at,
Mhm.
and really give of your time and really, I think really not getting caught up in me, oh, my world is crumbling. It's
Mhm.
only going to crumble if you think that. So here's the other thing. I gave a seminar, I think I told you, in Japan, which was all about activating your authentic self. And it was a 2-day event in Tokyo. And before, I think the night before, I Googled, or I actually used Chat AI, and I said, what is the main theme or messages and I gave all the names from everybody that I knew Dalai Lama, even Wayne Dyer, people that aren't alive, Louise Hay, Greg Braden, just everybody that I could think of. And it all came up the same message. It said that what you are thinking, you are manifesting. What you
Mm,
are speaking, you are creating. And it was said in different ways, much
uh,
more spiritual in some presentations. Scientifically, it was talking about the laws of attraction in that energy of the science of our energy and our vibration, how it draws that to you. So that's the message that I think is be careful what you're thinking or
mm,
speaking at this moment because you will manifest it. Even if you think it's a joke, it's not a joke. Um, and I think that's the key to this work. And I'm not saying that you can't have faith because I think faith is a very important thing to have. You have to have some grounding that's going to keep you grounded as opposed to really just saying, well, let's just see what happens.
true.
It's almost like, would you get on a boat internationally cross country on the Queen Mary and go from New York City to London with a kid out of high school who's 22 years old? Or would you like a captain who's been set sailing for 40 years and has done that route probably 100 times? Which one would you choose?
Exactly.
So it's the
Wow.
same thing. You have to really monitor our thoughts. And some people don't know what they're not aware of what they're thinking, or
Mm,
they've got old history or old patterns
mm,
and they need to rewire their brain. That's what my new book is about, called Beyond the Blueprint.
mm,
Uh, and it's all about rewiring your brain
mm.
and our DNA that helps us to shift our consciousness. And it's constant learning, it's constant change. And it's
Exactly.
not like have to follow your family's traditions or history or karma. It doesn't mean you can't break the cycle. So that,
Wanting to break the cycle.
yeah, I mean, everybody needs to break the cycle because we're living in a different world, a different time now. It wasn't what happened 100 years ago. Through technology and advancement, there's been a lot of shifts. I mean, constantly.
When is this new book coming out?
Probably next year. I just turned it in 2 weeks ago.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Yeah.
So, uh, you are a very prolific writer. So, when you get an idea for a book, to just
I never get an idea. It comes to me. There was about 3 years I had no ideas that were downloading, and I didn't have any books. I just said, well, I guess I'm not supposed to do anything now because I always listen intuitively what I'm supposed to write about or do. I can't read for myself, but I can feel. I
Mm.
say, go to that Starbucks for no reason, and there's the person I'm supposed to meet, or attend this thing because I'm supposed to go. And so I think it's all divinely guided if you listen.
Is it hard to listen, or is that a hard
Not
skill?
for me. I trusted implicitly. If something says don't get on an airplane, and I've done it twice, I won't get on the airplane. If I'm not supposed to work with those people, I won't work with them. I'll say, I'm sorry, I don't have any sessions available, or I'm not taking new clients. So if you listen, you will be told the answers. And you can, whatever question you have at night before you
Mm.
go to bed, just say, show me the answer for this question. And you'll go to bed and usually a dream will come up or the next morning you'll have the answer.
I like that. So, have you ever felt like you've had any regrets by listening? Like it took you
No.
in a direction that you really don't
Not
want to
in the beginning, I thought I did, but then I realized, there's no regrets. It's about just living life to the fullest. I turned down a big TV show for Fox
be.
studio many years ago, and I thought I made a big mistake. even my attorney at the time came to the meeting, and it was the final pilot. If I said no, they were shelving the whole, they had already filmed one pilot, but they didn't care for the host. And these people who were the producers had already done a hit TV show. But I walked in like I always do, and the red lights went off with these
Mhm.
two producers. And I just said, I'm sorry, I have to say no. And for a couple of years, I thought I regretted it. And I
Mhm.
said, well, maybe that was a yes or no. Maybe I should have said yes. But I obviously it wasn't. And I remember it was a Friday afternoon after I had this meeting, and they even said, think about it. We need an answer over the weekend. And I looked up at I was at the 20th Century Fox parking lot, and I don't know whether there was a tower or a clock or something there. And I just looked and I said, well, it is what it is. If I made a mistake, I'm sorry. If not, this is how I feel. And I didn't say anything else. And I drove home uh, and then I told them no because he was
That's
going to start work on Monday.
wow.
It was that fast.
Wow, but to really trust how you felt, that people don't do that.
I know.
That is
And
quite,
I've told some other people in the business and they thought I was crazy. Oh, what's wrong with you? Do you know how hard it is to be on television? And I said, yes, but that was never my goal,
Mhm. I like that.
you know?
You're being true to yourself.
Correct. And I got on, I was on a big TV show, two TV shows in Italy that to promote the Angel book, and they
Mhm.
had already said no. And I trusted it and I said, well, I'll be in Rome for a
Mhm.
week. If you need me, call me. I'll be at this hotel. And when I arrived in Rome from Milan, they texted me and said, we want you on the show because the producer had read the book, and the show I was on was the Good Morning America version called Una Mattina. And there was another show I didn't know. I did two shows,
Mhm.
and I sent him the book. And the 4 days before I was coming to Europe, the book fell out of the shelf at night. He couldn't sleep. He woke up and the book jumped out of his bookcase and he read it. It was in Italian, and he immediately booked me on two shows. And that's
Wow.
happened three times.
Mhm.
Someone in Germany who is a big iconic speaker, she was in a bookstore and my German book of angels jumped out. And then
Mhm.
another guy in England. And they all said it just jumped. So I think so I think there's energy beyond the book.
Right. Right. Well, we are all energy. Energy, we feel if we allow ourselves to feel it and see it. I think that's wonderful. And but I love that you're willing to help people do that. And I think what's interesting too, in the entertainment world, it seems like there's so many similar things to the spiritual world, meaning that you're always like pushing and exploring certain things. And don't you kind of do that in the spiritual world too?
Well, absolutely. And I think each business has its own fears.
Mhm.
Um, even when I was in Japan a couple years ago, I saw all these. I'd said, I wonder why I don't see any um, so many males on some of these trips that come for sessions. That year was summer. I must have seen 35 doctors that came to see me that were Japanese. And I'm like going,
Wow.
what? What's wrong? They said, well, we're doctors, but we have no confidence. And I said, oh, that's not good. I'd be afraid to be operated on you with no confidence. Um, and so then, that started the flow of me seen more males in Japan because I'd only had women come to see me in these companies that I worked for, and there was one or two males. But that summer, bam, bam, bam. So it's very interesting to see the dynamics, but it's also ask and you shall be given. Because in Switzerland, that happened also again. I
Mhm.
saw probably that week I was there working, I must have seen 10 bank managers or bank presidents that all their money had crashed or they had lost. Each bank had lost anywhere between 50 million to 30 million because that was when you had to disclose, they had to tell you who owns the account and they couldn't hide it anymore. So
Mhm.
they were freaked out. But because they didn't care before, now all of a sudden they had an issue or problem, they needed to see someone.
Oh, and you were there for them.
I was there for them, yeah. That have come to see me. I've helped them through their crisis moment. And then some of them I never hear back again from them, and some of them pop up later,
Mhm.
10 years later, or I run into them somewhere and they go, "Oh my God, I can't believe, you're here."
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine and she was saying life is hard. And I can see that there are just so many different things being thrown at you. How do you balance it? How do you?
Well, also because, especially in entertainment, if you're a celebrity or famous in some way through your work, they lose touch with, do you like me because I'm famous,
Mm,
or do you like me because I'm just me? That's one of the big issues with celebrities. And I've always liked them because they're them, not who they are, not their
mhm,
job. I think people are so mesmerized by titles, bank
mhm,
president.
mhm,
Uh, I had one executive from Coca-Cola, and I said to her, "You're putting too much energy. You need to become more spiritual." She was too corporate. And
mhm,
so she was in a situation where she was possibly going to get fired. They had told her. And she freaked out. I would see her maybe once every 6 months. So she saw me probably 3 times a week because
mhm,
she was going to lose this high-powered job in Atlanta. And this was years ago. And I said, "You are not your job title on your card." Because without that card, she was zero. So we worked on really, first of all, letting go of the fear, also letting go of the judgment or attachment she had to her title, because that means nothing. And I worked with her. I was basically internally cleaning house with her mind because she was so stuck in her world. And I had met her through an actor here in LA. And so over the period of the month, uh, she, I said to her, take action and just spreading the word. And she told some of her friends, and lo and behold, their competitor came to her offering her a job that paid more
mhm.
with a bigger title. So she was like, I can't believe that happened. I said, well, we were putting the intention out there and look what happened. And she ended up going to her superior bosses and said, I just want to let you know I have an offer from your competitor, and I'm probably going to take it if you don't let me know what the deal is. Are you letting me go or what are you doing? Well, they came back 2 days later offering her more and another title. So she stayed. She resigned and stayed. But there was a month period, she was losing her mind because without that card, and that was her test, she had to learn to trust.
So, what was it like for you working with her when?
I really had to pull out all the stops and get on the battlefield with her because it was a lot of, she also had a lot of anger and resentment from her childhood, her dad, her mom, her brother. So once we got rid of that, she could let the spiritual part of activate that positive energy into all areas of her life. Now she got married. She could never have a relationship. She got married. I think she had a kid. Sometimes they go on to these grand stories and I never hear, but I hear tidbits of what happened and then I don't know what happened to them. Um, but that was a
Mhm.
blessing for her. She didn't lose her job.
Wow, that sounds like a beautiful story. Now, what you do, is it something you want to continue doing?
Oh, sure. I love people. So I will continue to do this. And I love people from all over the world. And I'm just open to letting the universe sort of activate, how the next presentation, whether it's through film, through television, through radio, through books, through live events, or an individual person who, I'll give sessions to people, and that's how I got to this big event in Milan that was through Forbes and another company that I gave a session to a client 3 years ago in Milan. And one of my intentions was I wanted to have a great PR when I was there. And I met her, and she went away, started to create all her stuff. I didn't speak to her all those years, but then I gave a session that week to a woman who was a journalist from Vanity Fair, and she ended up writing like a 9-page article on me um, that was beyond. It was amazing. And then this woman came back last year sending me an email. She said, "Do you have an agent? Do I have to go through an agent to book you?" And I said, "No, I am the agent." And
Nice.
she booked me and we set it up. And, they brought me to Milan for the week in March. And it was a beautiful experience spending time through 3 days with these people. It was 150 people, and they bought my Business Guru Italian version, and it was in the swag bag because they got products. It was anybody who worked in the luxury brand hotel business, spa owners, wellness companies, product companies were there. And those were my audience that I had to work with. And they booked me already for next year. It was so successful. So
Yeah,
I was happy to say yes.
nice. Well, how many languages do you speak?
I just speak pretty good Italian and pretty good Spanish. My
Okay.
French, I lived in France, but I understand it, but don't practice. I haven't practiced it in years.
Well, I think that's wonderful that you're doing that. And I love that you're willing to just go out there and be part of it. There's no resistance, you're just with the flow, which,
Yeah.
which is beautiful. And I love that you're helping other people do that too. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, how
Yeah,
would
they
they?
could just go to my website or Instagram at Gary H. Quinn. People DM me. And if anybody wants to get a free audio meditation CD on trust and happiness, I'm happy to send it to them. I use it in my work, but it's on my website. But, people I do shows and, the giveaways I give them because I think it's important to access their inner power. And, even when I go to certain parties, I'll meet people and I'll say, hey, they'll be fascinated by what I do. And I said, well, I'm happy to send you some audio CDs. So I met a judge recently at some fundraiser I went to that my client was hosting. And I sent him one, and he said it helped him get through this period that he was in. And look, if that's all it did, he didn't book a session, I don't care. But that hour or 45-minute audio helped him.
Nice. Well, what do you have to lose? I mean, if you have a chance to really live your best life,
Absolutely. There are no limits.
and there's no downside to doing it.
Correct. I think we just have to go for it and uh, really honor every moment and don't waste any time.
That's key right there. But at the same time, we're all on this path. And I mean, just like meeting you, which I was so happy that we had this opportunity to meet. That was such a blessing. So you
And
never
that we had picked the numbers that we had met earlier and didn't know we were going to sit on the sofa.
so that was so cool.
But
Yeah,
that's divine intervention.
are you also a screenwriter?
Yes, I've written some things with Victoria,
Mhm.
two Christmas films. I was a producer on two projects that my director friend he brought me into with Sharon Stone, and they were spiritual projects called The Invocation, We the People, and I also narrated I think two of them or one of them. That was fun to get into the studio and narrate with the audio. But because was an actor many years ago, that was a natural. I'd done it before when you do looping on a for a TV
Mhm.
pickups or whatever in the studio. So I think everything works hand in hand.
It
You
does.
know, one door opens the door to others. I think you never want to limit yourself. Everything's possible that you can do.
I agree with that 100%. So, if people want to find your books, can they find them on your website?
Amazon
Amazon.
website. Yeah, all of them are the cards on Amazon. These are great, great, easy gifts that you can find that are really fun. You just shuffle them. They have gold around the sides. So yeah, I mean, it's about just really and next time I do my next event, people can go on my website and my next event is in Sun Valley, Idaho in June, and then I'll be going to Italy for a month in October because I have a children's book coming out there.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. What kind of children's book do you have?
It's an otter who doesn't want to swim in the water because he's fearful, even though his family lives in the water.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah,
Well, I look forward to seeing that one as well. Well,
cool.
Gary, you are wonderful. You have a fan here, and I'm just so blessed and grateful to have met you. And thank you for your time on this.
Absolutely. And we'll stay in touch. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.